Hey, Demonic Pacts is just around the corner, and Jagex dropped a brand new spoiler today, which is Nature's Accord. Now, this is a brand new Tier 5 farming relic. We've seen kind of some of the buffs from this in the past than various other relics, but it is a little bit different. A quick overview on this. Number one thing, you get Fairy Mushroom, and that's going to go into the topic for today's video. But other than that, it kind of boosts overall your farming output. You're going to get a lot of utility out of your seeds, tons of resources, tons of XP. Pretty much just getting a couple seeds and you'll kind of blast through a lot of the farming requirements and goals. Just keep in mind there is no instant grow this time around. Overall, it's been a pretty good relic, and it's probably the most powerful farming specific focused relic you're going to get. But without that instant grow, you will have to do like kind of rotational farm runs. However, you do get the Fairy Mushroom, so you'll have access to quick teleports to go around to all the farming patches to plant your seeds. And then don't forget that the tick rate for farming is 5x, so everything grows 5 times faster, and that's uniform whether you pick this relic or not. Overall, it's a pretty good relic. I don't know if I'm super eyeing it. I do know farming can be painful and slow, and it'll be kind of region dependent on how I'm going to max that. Overall, I would say it's a good relic, but I think the Fairy Mushroom and the teleport utility is an interesting twist that Jagex has brought. So let's get into that. First, I want to kind of evaluate the different teleport relics we've seen in the past in both Trailblazer Reloaded and Raging Echoes. And then I want to talk about the teleport relics that we've seen thus far spoiled for Demonic Pacts. Now, we haven't seen all the relics, so there is a chance Jagex spoils a bunch more teleport relics at Tier 3 maybe, or maybe some other scattered teleport utility tools around with the other relics. I wouldn't be so surprised if they did that, because that's what they're doing so far. I also want to talk about the early teleport unlocks that we get. I think this is going to be important on understanding on whether you actually choose these relics for their teleport utility, or you just choose them specifically for the boost you get to the skills or the PVM content, right? And lastly, I think I want to go over how this overall impacts Demonic Pacts in general and the considerations. If you are watching this video at a later date and then we have had more spoilers around more teleports, I think the considerations and the impacts will stay uniform. Now that we've seen enough of a trend, I was kind of holding off on this video. I had this speculation for a while, but now that we've seen 3 of these types of relics, and I'll explain what I mean as we get into it. So, in the past, we had Trailblazer Reloaded. At Tier 2, we got Fairy's Flight and Globetrotter. Now, this time, I think Fairy's Flight was a fan favorite. It's a brand new teleport utility that we've never seen or have access to in the main game. Brings you all to the fairy rings, leprechauns, and spirit trees as well in one single utility. Most importantly, it's an offhand item, so you don't have to carry the Draman Staff in your main hand. You can carry this instead in your offhand, which is kind of nice, and it gives you a lot of good teleport utility. It almost effectively fixes farming to some degree because it gives you a quick access to teleport, and you can just quickly interrupt whatever you're doing, quickly do a farm run, and then hop back to wherever you were, hopefully with a good teleport. I think the biggest issue here that we saw with Trailblazer Reloaded, though, was that at Tier 2, you probably weren't getting a lot of utility out of these teleport relics just because you probably haven't unlocked your second region yet. I think the second region unlock typically comes a little bit closer to Tier 3. Now, it just depends on what tasks you prioritize. And remember, points and tasks kind of impact the regions and the tiers a little bit differently. However, I think Jagex learned this, and so when we got to Raging Echoes, all the teleport utility relics moved to Tier 3. This aligned a little bit better with overall kind of completion and getting access to the second region. Also, you do have Karamja, but at the point you get this, now you have a really powerful teleport. I think in Raging Echoes, Clue Compass was a clear fan favorite, not only just for completing clues, but the sheer amount of teleport options you had was absolutely absurd. I think the most difficult and annoying part of it was just going through the menu and choosing the right teleport for Clue Compass. But again, we used to have a standard uniform kind of tier for teleportation, and that's the utility unlocked, and then all the other ones were mostly focused on skilling or PVM or utility overall for the game, and so we had that. Now that has changed, right? Looking at the spoilers that we've seen thus far, so far we've had Evil Eye at Tier 3, and this kind of had Jagex kind of allude us to another, teleport utility choice at Tier 3. However, now that we've spoiled and seen Nature's Accord, which is giving you the Fairy Mushroom at Tier 5, we know that the teleport relic components have been separated out of tier 3. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that tier 3 won't have more teleport utilities. I think it's a speculation that we all have. However, I don't think that's going to be the case this time around. And it's kind of interesting that also the clue compass has been broken out into conniving clues. Now what's important to understand here is you will get those clue contracts to teleport to your next steps, but they will burn as you do steps. So, and as you do more difficult clues, you will get more clue contracts at a higher chance, but that you will burn more into doing those clues, right? So I think it pretty much effectively makes one clue the same amount of challenge as before, and then one clue twice as fast with the quick instant teleports. Don't forget, Jagex did clarify that you no longer need the items for emotes on conniving clues, which is I think the most powerful thing, that you can pretty much just do almost any clue early on just by digging and teleporting there and doing the emote without the items. I think that's really, really powerful. But it is important to understand that it won't work. You won't be able to sustain clue contracts for every single step you do. It'll be, my guess, about 50%, which means about half your clues, right? So overall, we've seen teleport utility kind of split across 3 different tiers. And I know conniving clues isn't just a pure teleport item. So early teleport unlocks. What's important to understand is in Varlamore, right, we have a couple of things. One, everyone's going to get fairy rings unlocked. We're all going to get a Drahman staff. There are a couple of fairy ring locations to teleport here, but as you unlock different regions of the map, you will have a lot more fairy rings in some of the older regions and some of the larger areas as well. And so you'll have a lot more teleport utility with fairy rings, which is really powerful. And this is the one that's unlocked for free for everyone, so everyone will have access to this. It's important to remember that. Also, standard spellbook teleports. We do have this Civitas teleport, and then once you unlock your other regions, some of those standard spellbook teleports might apply to those regions, and you'll have access to those. Those will primarily focus on the traditional, older, original regions, right? So we don't have Mistalin this time around, but maybe Current, and then you'll have access to Asgarnia as well with Falador teleports, right? And a few of those. Again, standard spellbook is not that much, but it is one of the teleports we have access to for free across all accounts. Now the Quetzal Whistle. Everyone will probably be doing Hunter somewhat early, especially if you're going to go the Woodsman Relic and unlock Hunter. You'll get this and you'll have infinite charges from the start. However, it won't be too difficult, I think, to sustain Hunter and whistles and contracts and charges. And this will be one of your primarily early, if you focus on, PVM and skilling, this will be your primary kind of teleport utility aside from fairy rings around Varlamore. And then last but not least, we have the Pendant of Eights. This one comes from Frost Naguas or Moxliatl. It's a difficult name to pronounce, but nonetheless, it's going to have a couple other more teleport locations. This is primarily focused on both of these utilities are going to be primarily focused around Varlamore. As you unlock your other regions, you will have to look into, just depending on what you have, what teleport utilities you have there. Just remember, fairy rings is going to be your go-to, right? And then it's up to you to determine whether the fairy mushroom or the evil eye is going to be good for you. So things to understand, right? I think the biggest thing to note is, as we saw in Nature's Accord, we have both a teleport combination with a bunch of utility for the skill, right? We have a teleport relic, and then it also gives you a bunch of boost to farming. And therefore, I think we're getting an overall slight power boost because of this. Even Evil Eye is kind of like a basic last recall. If we do get last recall will be nice because I'm pretty sure it should reset your special attack and kind of everything else. But if that doesn't, you will still be able to set up your house depending on your regions. If you can build a pool, you can kind of use that as a pseudo kind of cheap last recall. And so Evil Eye is a nice utility for that, especially if you're going to dive really deep into PVM content. Evil Eye is just you're going to get so much use out of it later into the game, right? For killing the bosses for combat achievements, killing the bosses for drops, for the tasks, right, is all going to be super valuable. However, if you don't choose that and you realize that, oh no, I really want a teleport utility, I missed out on Evil Eye, and then when you get across to tier 5 and you get to the farming relic, that might be a little bit more kind of enticing because you lost out on a teleport utility, you get to tier 5, and now you can choose another teleport utility, which will kind of save you later on, right? So I think this is going to be up to you to judge on where and when you want to choose that, right? I mentioned earlier that we saw the teleport relics being at tier 2 and then move to tier 3. I think what's nice is Jagex has kind of split this across tier 3, a small mini kind of half teleport relic at tier 4, and then another teleport relic at tier 5, right? But overall, I think we're going to get a much more power boost out of the relics based off of the skills and the abilities that you get. And then you'll get to be able to choose when and at what point in the game you're going to choose that unlock. Like, for example, if you're going to unlock Current, you don't have to necessarily choose Evil Eye. You can wait and then get the Fairy Mushroom at tier 5, and then you're going to have a lot of good teleports around with the Fairy Mushrooms, and then you'll have the benefit of the Farming Guild and as such, right? So just kind of keep that in mind overall on like how and when you want to choose those relics. It's going to be important. If you have other thoughts on how this has really changed how you choose teleport relics and the buffs we're getting to the relics, definitely leave some comments below. Really appreciate you guys all tuning into my channel. Stay tuned for more content.